The branding iron hissed in the fire, the heat warping the air above it. Clara May stood still, hands clenched into fists behind her dress, her bare feet biting into the dirt floor of the barn. She could smell singed hair and the acrid scent of whiskey wafting from her father's breath. Jedediah Calloway didn't say a word. He simply stared into the flames, his face a map of anger and years baked under the sun. The silence stretched like a drawn bowstring. Clara shifted her weight, and he turned his head just enough to catch her movement. "Twitch again," he muttered, "and I'll brand you like I do the cattle." She didn't flinch, didn't blink. That was how you survived in the Calloway house, by being Stone. Stone couldn't cry. Stone didn't bruise. Stone didn't fall in love. She slipped out of the barn once Jedediah passed out, face down in the hay, a bottle still gripped in his fingers. The night air hit her like a baptism, cool, dry, wide with stars. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it the scent of juniper and distant rain. Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and looked out toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges and the broken hills, was freedom. But she wasn't just looking for escape tonight. She was looking for him. She mounted her horse, a speckled mare named Ghost, and kicked off into the darkness, hooves muffled in the dry earth. Her heart thudded faster than the ride, though she knew the trail by feel now. She'd traveled it enough in the last few weeks, always after dark, always in silence. He was waiting when she arrived, perched on a rock near the canyon's edge, his silhouette framed by moonlight. "Tatsii." He rose as she dismounted, the wind tugging gently at the fringes of his leather tunic. He said nothing, but his eyes softened the moment they met hers. "I'm late," she whispered. "You're here," he answered. There were no lies between them, no need for them. She walked to him and handed him the small cloth bundle she tied together. Dried meat, flatbread, 2 small apples. He took it wordlessly, his fingers brushing hers. That single contact sent warmth rushing through her. She wanted to say something bold, something poetic. Instead, she asked, "You ever think about just going? Leaving it all behind?" He unwrapped the bundle carefully, sat, and motioned for her to join him. "My people have many words for leaving, few for forgetting." She didn't press. She never did. In truth, she just wanted to hear him speak. His voice grounded her like the earth itself. They ate in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. When he finished, he tilted his head toward her, curious. "You're hurt," he said quietly. She touched her wrist unconsciously. The bruise there bloomed dark under her sleeve. "Not bad," she lied. He didn't challenge the lie. Instead, he reached over and ran a thumb gently over her knuckles. "You are always running. But you are not prey, Clara." She smiled despite herself. "Feels like it some days." He chuckled softly, rare and warm. "You carry fire in your eyes. Even the rattlesnakes would step aside." She leaned against him then, letting the silence settle over them again, this time wrapped in something softer. She wished the moment could stretch forever. But forever wasn't welcome in their world. She returned just before dawn, slipping through the back fence and ducking beneath the porch. Her boots left only the faintest trail across the packed ground. Inside, the house was quiet. Jedediah's snores thundered from the bedroom. She crept to the small cot in the storage room where she slept, lay down without removing her clothes, and stared up at the cracked ceiling. For one moment, she let herself imagine a life somewhere else, with him. No brands, no fists, just open sky. She woke to the sound of boots on wood, rough voices, her brother's. "Where the hell'd you go last night?" Clem snarled from the doorway. His eyes were sharp and narrow, like a hound who caught scent of something. Clara sat up slowly, went to check on the north fence. "Heard coyotes. You took your mare?" "She's faster than lanterns." Hank stepped in beside him, taller and broader, but slower in thought. He crossed his arms. "Pa says he saw you heading toward the canyon." Clara's heartbeat skipped. "Y'all spying on me now? You hiding something?" She rose, brushing dirt off her skirt. "I'm hiding from you too, and your bad breath. That's what I'm doing." Clem stepped forward, grabbing her by the arm. "Careful, sister. You're talking real brave for someone with so many secrets." Her arm throbbed under his grip. She held his gaze. "Let go, Clem." Jedediah's voice cut through the tension like a cleaver. "Enough." They all turned. He stood there, shirtless, scars crisscrossing his chest, his face weathered like driftwood. He studied Clara with something close to suspicion. "You been meeting one of them Navajo boys?" The air froze. A bird outside chirped once, then fell silent. She forced herself to scoff. "You drunk again, Pa?" He stepped forward. "Don't lie to me, girl. I know what I seen. And I swear on my rifle if you're sneaking off to lay with one of them." "I ain't laying with no one," she snapped, voice too loud, too fast. That did it. Jedediah's hand cracked across her face. The sound echoed. Clara staggered, blinking hard, refusing to fall. Clem grinned. Hank looked away. Jedediah leaned in, voice low and venomous. "I catch you with him. I kill him first. Then I deal with you." He walked away, boots thudding like judgment. Clem and Hank followed, whispering things she couldn't hear and didn't want to. She stood alone in the hallway, one hand pressed to her cheek, her breath shaking. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give them that. But she knew now what had started as something gentle and secret was turning into something dangerous. That night, she didn't go to meet Tatsiai. She waited until the moon climbed high and the house fell silent. And then she snuck out. The stars above were sharp, like eyes watching her. Ghost snorted once, but didn't resist. Clara gripped the reins and rode faster than she ever had before. She found him still waiting, exactly where she left him. "I thought," he started. "I couldn't," she interrupted. "Not last night." His eyes searched hers, reading what she didn't say. He rose slowly, taking her hands. "Your world wants to burn you down. I know. And yet here you are. I had to see you." Her voice cracked. He nodded. Then, gently, he pulled her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest. "They know, Tatsiai. They know." He held her tighter. "Then we stop hiding." She pulled back. "They'll come for you. Let them." "No," she said, trembling. "We can run." But he was shaking his head. "No, I do not run. Not again." She stared at him. This quiet, fierce man who had shown her more kindness in weeks than her family had in 17 years. A long silence passed. Finally, she said, "Then we fight." His expression didn't change, but his hand found hers, fingers lacing tight. They stood on the canyon's edge as dawn broke, red and gold spilling across the sky like blood and fire. Down below, the plains stretched endlessly. Somewhere in that vastness, trouble was coming. She could feel it in her bones. But she also felt something else, stronger, deeper. Resolve. Clara turned toward Tatsiai, heart pounding. "They'll try to break us," she said. "They will fail," he answered. She smiled then, wild, dangerous, unafraid. And for the first time in her life, Clara May Calloway knew exactly who she was. A girl with fire in her eyes. And fire didn't run. Fire burned. Each night, the canyon became their world. Clara met Tatsiai beneath the blood moon and under cloudless skies, in warm breezes and bitter winds. Sometimes they sat together in silence, letting the stars speak for them. Other nights, they spoke until dawn stole the darkness. In those quiet hours, time bent around them, and the outside world, the fists, the fear, the threats, vanished like mist. Tatsiai would bring her bundles of herbs and carved tokens. She once teased him for giving her a bone charm shaped like a snake. "You think I'm venomous?" she'd asked with a sly grin. "No," he said. "Snakes are wise. They don't bite unless threatened." She hadn't told him then how many times she'd felt ready to strike. Clara brought him her own gifts, half loaves of bread, scraps of fabric, sometimes poems scribbled in secret in her journal. They traded stories. He told her how his father died in a raid when he was just a boy, how he rose as a leader not by force, but by guiding, watching, listening. She told him about her mother, a memory blurred by time and silence, how she died giving birth, and how the house had grown colder ever since. "You think your father ever loved her?" Tatsiai asked one night. "No," Clara said, eyes on the fire. He just wanted something to own. Something that couldn't talk back. Tatsuya nodded. That is not love. Love does not chain. When she looked at him, she saw no chains. Only freedom. And danger. Because the more they grew close, the more she noticed eyes watching her back home. One morning, as she returned from their meeting just before sunup, she found Clem standing by the water trough, arms crossed. Horse is lathered up, Clara. Must have been a long ride. She didn't stop walking. I checked the northern traps. At night, coyote signs. Wanted to see if they came back. He narrowed his eyes. You lie like my used to. All soft and calm. Makes it hard to tell. Maybe because I ain't lying. He said nothing, just smirked and lit a cigar. Smoke curled around his head like a snake coiling for a strike. Later that day, Clara's hands trembled as she chopped wood. The axe thudded into the stump again and again, but the rhythm was broken. The unease in her gut wouldn't settle. She kept thinking of Clem's smirk. She didn't go to the canyon that night. She waited 3 days, keeping busy, keeping quiet, watching Clem and Hank through narrowed eyes. They spoke in half sentences, exchanged glances over supper, wandered out late, and came back muddy and reeking of gun oil. Finally, Clara couldn't bear it. On the 4th night, she rode to Tatsuya like a storm. He met her with a look of concern. You bring fear with you. They know, she whispered. I don't know how much. But they're watching. They talk like men who've seen blood and want more. Tatsuya didn't speak. He simply pulled her to him, holding her tight enough to still her shaking. I don't want this to end, she said. But I don't want you hurt either. I would rather die free with you than live behind walls of silence. She looked up at him, searching his face. You'd die for me? No, he said. I'd live for you, if you'll let me. She kissed him then, with the fierce desperation of someone who knew time was running out. But time was already gone. Clem had followed her. He'd crept close enough to see the kiss, to hear the words. Rage and betrayal coiled inside him like hot lead. His little sister, wrapped up in a savage's arms. It made his skin crawl. He didn't go to Clara. He went straight to Jedediah. The next morning, Clara stepped outside to gather eggs, and saw Jedediah sharpening his hunting knife, the one with the bone handle he only used when someone needed killing. Hank stood nearby, cleaning his rifle. She froze. Something wrong? Hank asked, too casual. No, she lied. Jedediah stood, stretching his back. Saddle up, boys. We're heading out to the canyon trail. Clara stepped forward. The canyon. Jedediah's eyes met hers. Cold. Flat. Time we clear out whatever vermin's been sneaking around our land. Clem chuckled behind her. Time for a hunt. They left within the hour. Clara's hands trembled as she watched the dust trail vanish into the distance. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe. And then all at once she could. She ran. Ran like the wind had caught her feet. Ghost was saddled and ready before her mind caught up to her heart. She rode hard and fast, heart pounding like war drums. The sun was nearly down by the time she reached the canyon. Tatsuya was there, as always, waiting. They're coming, she gasped, stumbling off her horse. They know. All of them. My father, my brothers, they're armed, and they're coming for you. He didn't panic. He didn't even flinch. We leave now, he said, calm and steady. Ride far. No, Clara said. If we run, they'll find us. And they'll keep hunting. They won't stop. He looked at her, studying every line of her face. Then he nodded once. Then we don't run. They moved quickly. Tatsuya led her to a narrow pass, an ancient trail used by warriors long ago, hidden from sight. He handed her a knife, carved from obsidian, cool and sharp. I don't know how to use it, she said. You'll learn. They laid traps, trip lines, pitfalls, narrow crossings where one man could fight 3. Tatsuya knew the land like it was his own body. Clara followed every instruction, heart in her throat. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, everything was ready. They crouched in the shadows together, waiting. Clara whispered, I'm scared. I'm not. Why not? He looked at her, not smiling. Because fear is loud. Love is louder. She reached for his hand and gripped it tight. The sounds came just after nightfall. Hoofbeats, the jingle of bridles, hushed voices. Clara's breath caught. 3 shadows appeared on the ridge. Jedediah's voice echoed down the canyon. "Come out, savage. Let's talk man to man." Tatsiai said nothing. Jedediah stepped forward. "No. Then I'll drag your scalp out myself. And maybe I'll bring your little whore home after." Clara tensed. Tatsiai gripped her hand tighter. Jedediah took another step. A snare snapped, and he stumbled, tumbling to the ground with a snarl. Hank moved to help him. Then another trap triggered, a cascade of rocks crashing down, forcing them to scatter. Gunshots rang out. Thunder in the canyon. Tatsiai moved like smoke, silent and swift, striking and retreating. Clara ducked behind cover, knife in hand, heart hammering. Hank cursed loud as something cut his leg. Clem fired blindly into the dark. Jedediah rose, limping. "Enough games. Come out and fight me." Clara stood, stepping into view. Jedediah stared at her, stunned. "You. I warned you," she said, voice trembling but firm. "I begged you. You'd kill your own kin for him?" "No," she said. "I'd kill to be free." He raised his pistol. But Tatsiai was faster. He tackled Jedediah hard, the two of them tumbling down the slope. The gun fired, once, twice, into the air. Dust exploded. Grunts, fists, blood. Clem shouted, running toward them. Clara stepped into his path. He swung. She ducked, drove the knife into his thigh. He screamed, falling to his knees. Hank backed away, bleeding and wide-eyed. "She's crazy, they're both crazy." And then it was quiet. Jedediah lay unconscious. Clem groaned on the ground. Hank vanished into the darkness. Clara dropped the knife. Her hands shook. Her dress was torn. Blood streaked her face. Tatsiai rose slowly, watching her. "You fought," he said softly. "I did," she whispered. He took her hand, and this time she didn't let go. They stood together under the stars, surrounded by silence, blood, and something new. Not peace. Not yet. But the first breath of it. Clara looked toward the ridge. The horizon stretched wide, endless. "I can't go back," she said. "You don't have to." And, together, they rode into the night, toward whatever came next. The wind howled low through Spirit Canyon, curling through the jagged rock like it was whispering secrets only the dead could understand. Clara sat crouched beside Tatsiai in the half-light, her fingers wrapped tight around the obsidian blade he'd given her. Her breath came in quiet bursts, lungs aching not just from the climb, but from the weight of knowing, tonight, someone would die. Tatsiai moved without sound, crouching beside the ledge, eyes narrowed on the trail winding up toward them. He had painted 2 dark lines beneath his eyes and tied his hair back with a leather cord. He looked like stone carved from the earth, patient and unmoving. "They'll come up the east trail," he said, voice low. "There's no cover there, but they'll think it's the quickest way." Clara nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The last stand. The place's ancestors had once fought to the death, refusing to surrender to soldiers who carried flags and fire. Now it was her turn to do the same. She glanced behind her. 3 traps strung between boulders with sharpened stakes, 2 bottles of gunpowder Tatsiai had saved, and 1 rifle with 5 rounds. "What if they come from the riverbed?" she asked. "They won't," he said. "Too slow. And they want this over quick." She nodded again, eyes scanning the ridges. Below, a dust trail rose, 3 riders, maybe 4. Shapes moved like phantoms, blurry in the haze of dusk. Jedediah was among them. She'd recognize the stiff set of his shoulders anywhere. Hank rode beside him. Clem, too, though he still limped from the knife wound. Their silhouettes made Clara's stomach twist. "How many bullets?" she asked. 5, Tatsiai repeated. "And they've got rifles." "Yes." "You still think we can win?" He turned to her, voice soft and steady. "We're not here to win. We're here to survive." For a moment, that sounded like the same thing. She settled behind a rock, cradling the rifle. Her hand shook. Tatsiai placed his palm over hers. His touch was grounding, like water to fire. "You don't have to fight," he said. "I do," she whispered. Because I choose to. The riders dismounted below, boots crunching dirt. Jedediah called up, voice sharp as ever. Clara May, I know you're up there, girl. You come on down now, and we can end this clean. Don't make it ugly. Clara raised the rifle, stared down the barrel. Her heart thundered. Don't answer, Totsie, I said, crouching beside her. Let them come. But Jedediah wasn't waiting. He barked a command. Clem and Hank started up the trail, rifles slung across their backs, boots digging into the narrow path. One wrong step, and they'd fall. But Clara knew them. They wouldn't hesitate. Clem hit the first trap. A trip line snapped, and the air was filled with a scream of wood and rope. A spike swung from above, striking him in the shoulder. He howled, spinning, blood spraying across the rocks. He tumbled backward, down the slope. Gunshots fired from below, Hank firing blind. The shots echoed like thunder. Totsie ducked, pulled Clara down. Jedediah roared, You think you're safe up there, girl? I'll drag your bones out and burn what's left. Clara's hands trembled around the rifle. Totsie nodded to her. Now. She stood, aimed and fired. The shot missed, but not by much. Hank ducked for cover. Clem didn't get up. Jedediah fired back. Stone shattered beside her face. Clara dropped, gasping. They'll flank us. They'll try, Totsie said, rising to his feet. He grabbed a torch, lit it from the small fire they'd kept low, and ran toward the ledge where the powder bottles waited. Below, Jedediah yelled something Clara couldn't make out. Then Hank charged the slope again, screaming, rifle raised. Totsie waited until he was halfway up. Then he tossed the torch. The explosion was deafening. Fire erupted in the narrow pass, blinding white and then thick smoke. Rocks caved in. Screams followed, Hank maybe. Clara couldn't see through the haze. Totsie grabbed her arm. Move. They fled up the trail, climbing higher toward the ancient burial ledge. There was no shelter beyond it, only cliffs. The plan had always been to hold the lower pass, but now they had no choice. Clara's legs burned. Her lungs begged for air. Behind her, she heard the faint clatter of someone still climbing. Jedediah. The bastard never quit. They reached the ledge. The view stretched wide, open sky, distant mountains, a winding river glinting in the moonlight. For a moment, it was beautiful. Then a bullet whistled past Clara's ear. She dropped, rolled behind a slab of stone. Totsie ducked beside her. He's coming, she said. Totsie reached into his belt, pulled out the last 2 rounds. Give me the rifle. Clara handed it over, but her eyes stayed fixed on the trail. Jedediah appeared seconds later, blood running down his temple, coat scorched, rage burning hotter than the fires he used to brand cattle. I warned you, he screamed. You shame my name, you whore. Clara stepped out from the rocks. I'm not your anything. He raised his pistol. Totsie fired once. The bullet struck Jedediah in the thigh. He dropped to one knee, roaring. Clara didn't move. She held his gaze. You beat my mother, she said. You broke me, but you don't get to end me. Jedediah lifted his arm to shoot. Totsie fired again. The pistol fell from Jedediah's hand. He slumped forward, bleeding and gasping, still alive but broken. Clara walked toward him slowly. Dust swirled around her boots. Her face was unreadable. He coughed. Go on then. Finish it. She knelt beside him. No, she said. That's what you do. She stood, turned away. Totsie watched her with quiet pride. They left Jedediah there, staring into the dust, cursing the wind and the woman who refused to become his reflection. As they made their way down the canyon, Totsie touched Clara's hand. You could have killed him. I wanted to, she admitted. But if I had, part of me would have stayed up there with him. They found Ghost waiting near the river. The horse neighed once, impatient, nervous. Where will we go? Clara asked. Where the sun rises, Totsie said. There is land beyond this place. Safer places. Clara looked back once, just once, at the ridge. Smoke still curled upward. Somewhere behind them, the ghosts of the canyon watched in silence. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. Just breath. Just heartbeat. They rode into the night. And though the canyon had nearly taken everything, it had also given her the most precious thing she'd ever known: choice. The morning light spilled over the mesas like gold syrup, slow and warm, touching everything with promise. Clara stood barefoot in the red dust, her hair unbound and wind-tossed, eyes lifted to the horizon. Behind her, the camp stirred, the soft clatter of pots, the low murmur of women preparing food, children chasing each other between the tents. It was a new rhythm, one she had never known before. There was no shouting, no footsteps made of rage, just the pulse of life, steady and free. Tatsi-I approached from behind, a leather water pouch slung over one shoulder, a small bundle tucked under his arm. Clara turned when she heard him and smiled in that quiet way she'd learned from watching him. Not everything needed words. He handed her the bundle. Inside was a folded dress, hand-woven, dyed the deep blue of dusk, with white patterns across the sleeves that told the story of wind and fire. Two spirits meeting beneath the stars. "For you," he said. "It's beautiful," she whispered, fingertips brushing the fabric like it might vanish. "I don't deserve this." He frowned slightly. "You survived a war for love. You carry your scars without shame. If anyone deserves to be honored, it's you." She looked away, overwhelmed. The truth was, some nights she still woke with sweat on her brow, expecting her father's boots to thunder down the hallway. Sometimes in dreams she still saw Clem sneer or heard Hank calling her name with venom. But each time she reached for Tatsi-I, and the past retreated like a wounded beast. She wore the dress that night. The ceremony was simple: no priests, no written vows, no white lace or polished shoes. Instead, the wind carried their promises. The canyon itself bore witness. An old elder chanted a song that Clara couldn't understand, but she felt its meaning in her bones. Tatsi-I stood before her in ceremonial dress, with beads woven into his hair, face painted in patterns of strength and clarity. They did not exchange rings. Instead, they tied a braided cord around their joined hands and whispered their words. "I see you," he said. "I choose you," she answered. When the chant ended, they kissed beneath the open sky, and the people around them clapped, laughed, sang. Later, they sat together by a fire, her head on his shoulder. It was quiet except for the fire's crackle and distant coyotes. Clara watched the flames dance and spoke softly. "You think the canyon will remember us?" Tatsi-I nodded. "The canyon remembers everything." She nodded back, content, and closed her eyes. Days turned to weeks. Clara learned how to shape clay and fire it into bowls. She learned to ride bareback without falling and how to track deer through the rocks without making a sound. She learned the names of herbs that healed and ones that harmed. The other women watched her with cautious curiosity at first, but over time they softened. They saw her patience, her willingness to learn, her refusal to pretend she was better than them. She told stories, too, about the place she came from, about growing up with ghosts for parents, about a barn that smelled of fear and iron. They listened, nodded. Pain, after all, had many languages. One evening, a child tripped and bloodied her knee. Clara was the first to reach her. She pressed a clean cloth to the cut and whispered a song her mother once sang, a tune so old her memory had worn its edges thin. The child stopped crying. The women saw. That night, one of them, Sally, the weaver, offered Clara a strand of red yarn. "For your hair," she said. "You're one of us now." Clara took it with shaking hands. But peace has a short fuse on the frontier. 2 moons after the wedding, smoke rose in the west. A scout rode in fast and breathless. "Settlers," he warned. 5 men. Looking for a girl. White girl. Riding hard. Armed. Clara's stomach dropped. "They never quit," she muttered. Tatsi-I stood. "You don't have to face them." "I do." "You don't owe them anything." "I don't. But I owe me something." They argued. Not with anger, never with anger, but with the weight of knowing. Clara insisted on going to meet them. Not to fight. Not to run. To end it. She dressed in plain leather, tied the red thread into her braid, and rode Ghost once more. Tatsi-I rode beside her, silent but ready. They found the men camped near a shallow creek. 5 rough-looking drifters with sunburned necks and twitchy fingers. One of them stood as they approached. "You Clara Calloway?" Clara sat tall in the saddle. "I am." "We were hired to bring you back." "By who?" "Judge Wilkins down in Bitter Ridge. Says your father's dead. Says there's still land in your name." She stared, unmoved. "I buried my father myself, and I don't want the land." The man scratched his jaw. "We get paid either way. You come with us, we don't shoot." Tatsui's hand moved near his bow. Clara raised hers, stopping him. Then she leaned forward in the saddle. "I'm not going anywhere with you. Not back. Not ever." The man chuckled. "You think you got a choice? I made my choice 2 months ago. In the canyon. When I stood between my father's bullets and my own soul." He shifted. "You're out here playing squaw. You think that ends happy?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "I think it ends today." The man reached for his pistol. Tatsui moved first. An arrow buried itself in the man's shoulder before the gun cleared the holster. The other scrambled. 2 fired wildly, bullets tearing through dust and air. Clara dropped from the saddle and rolled, grabbing the rifle slung across her back. She fired once, one shot through the kneecap of a man diving behind a rock. Tatsui disarmed another with a blade to the wrist. The last man dropped his weapon and fled into the trees. It was over in seconds. The wounded men groaned, bleeding into the dirt. Tatsui stood over them, bow lowered. Clara walked forward slowly, rifle in hand. "You were warned," she said. The first man, still breathing, barely, cursed her through bloody teeth. "You're a disgrace." "No," Clara said calmly. "I'm free." She turned, mounted Ghost, and didn't look back. They returned to camp that night, the stars glowing fierce and bright. No one asked what had happened. They saw it in Clara's eyes. The storm had passed. As the fire crackled and drums thumped in the distance, Clara stood before the people and spoke for the first time. "My name is Clara May Calloway. But that name don't tell you who I am. It tells you who I was. I used to believe what I was told, that love meant obedience. That silence was safer than truth. That a woman had to belong to a man to be worth anything. But I've learned better." She looked toward Tatsui, whose eyes never left hers. "Love ain't what they taught me. Love ain't pain. It ain't chains. It's standing beside someone when the world wants you dead. It's surviving the fire and coming out the other side, still willing to feel." She stepped back, voice softening. "I chose him. And more than that, I chose me." The people clapped, some cheered. Tatsui took her hand. Later, under a blanket of stars, Clara whispered to the wind, as if it were listening. "If this story moved you," she said softly, "don't forget it. Don't bury it like they wanted to bury me. Share it. Speak it. There are more girls like me out there, chained, bruised, made small. Let them know they ain't alone." And the wind answered her, carrying her voice across the wild, free land. The rain came down like judgment, thick and merciless, pounding against the slanted roof of the old barn. Wind howled through the cracks in the boards, cold air slicing through the darkness like a knife. Clara gripped her little sister tight, her arms wrapped protectively around the girl's shivering frame as thunder rattled the world outside. They hadn't dared to speak for the past hour, not since the door of the house slammed open and their father's drunken screams chased them across the muddy yard, through the broken fence, and into this forgotten shelter where they now sat huddled among moldy hay and the ghosts of old tools. Clara's breath fogged in the chill. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her like wet parchment. Lottie, 10 years old and too small for this kind of suffering, curled tighter into her sister's chest. "I'm scared," Lottie whispered. "I know," Clara whispered back, brushing wet hair from her sister's forehead. "But I won't let him touch you again. I swear it." They'd heard him yelling before, heard the crash of furniture, the slurred curses, the shuffle of cards, and the snap of leather belts. But tonight was different. Tonight, the man they called Pa had nothing left to lose. He'd been gone for 2 days, chasing some luck that never showed up. When he returned, it was on the back of a borrowed horse, with a busted lip and the devil in his eyes. He smelled like whiskey and desperation. He had burst through the door, thrown their mother's last china plate at the wall, and declared, with the triumph of a madman, that he'd gambled their home away. "Don't look at me like that," he screamed when Clara dared to protest. "You two brats never brought me nothing but misery. Out. Out of my sight." Lottie had started crying, but Clara grabbed her hand and ran, through the back door, past the chicken coop, into the barn where they used to play before the world went run. Now they crouched in silence, counting seconds between thunderclaps, listening for boots sloshing through mud. But all they heard was the wind. "I want Mama," Lottie said. Her voice was a thread. Clara blinked, felt tears burn behind her eyes. She didn't want to cry, but the name opened a hole in her chest. Their mother had died a year ago this very week. Pneumonia, they said. But Clara always thought it was something deeper. Maybe heartbreak. Maybe hopelessness. She tightened her grip on Lottie. "Me too." Hours passed. The storm gave no mercy. Hunger twisted Clara's stomach into knots. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, and she knew Lottie hadn't either. They couldn't stay here. If he found them, God knew what he'd do. And if he didn't, well, freezing to death wasn't much better. Clara stood, gently pulling Lottie to her feet. "We're leaving." "Where?" "Someplace he can't find us." With a blanket of night overhead and the storm loosening its grip just enough, they stepped out into the soaked world. The path ahead was mud and shadows, but Clara didn't hesitate. She clutched her sister's hand and pushed forward, each step a battle against the cold and the sinking earth. They passed the dead tree at the edge of their property, the one Pa once threatened to hang their dog from before he sold it for whiskey. They didn't look back. The woods welcomed them with crooked arms. Trees swayed, creaked, and whispered in the wind. Branches clawed at their clothes. Leaves dripped icy water down their necks. But Clara walked on, teeth clenched, legs trembling. She remembered something her mother used to say: "The woods may be wild, but they don't lie." Men do. After what felt like hours, the girls collapsed at the base of a large oak. Clara's legs gave out, and Lottie curled into her lap like a kitten seeking warmth. "Clara, what are we going to do?" "We survive." She didn't know how, but the words came out steady, full of grit. That was all she could offer. A rustle in the distance froze her blood. Something moved in the underbrush, low and quick. Not the wind, not an animal. Her instincts flared. She stood, her body aching, eyes straining in the dark. Nothing, just black trees and dripping leaves. But the hairs on her neck stood tall. "Get behind me," she whispered to Lottie, who obeyed without question. Another sound, closer. A twig snapped. Then silence again. Clara's fists clenched. She wasn't a fighter. She had never even held a gun. But she'd die on her feet before letting her sister suffer more. Then a voice, low and slurred, echoed faintly through the trees. "Girls? You little runts out here." Her father. Lottie whimpered. Clara grabbed her, dragging her away from the sound. They stumbled through wet ferns and over roots, barely able to see 2 feet ahead. The voice came again, angrier. "You think you can hide from me?" Clara's heart pounded. She had no plan, no map, just the desperate drive to get away. They slipped down a slope slick with mud. Clara landed hard. The breath knocked from her lungs, but Lottie was safe. She heard him behind them now, closer, swearing, crashing through the woods like a wounded bear. "Run," she hissed, grabbing Lottie's hand again. The trees grew tighter, branches catching their sleeves and hair. Thunder rumbled again, though the rain had lightened. Clara's dress tore. Her knees bled, but she kept moving. A sudden opening appeared ahead, a narrow trail carved into the trees, overgrown and half swallowed by the forest. She had never seen it before. No time to think. They darted down the trail, feet slapping wet leaves. Behind them, her father's footsteps grew more distant, his curses fading into frustrated growls. Then silence. They ran until Clara's legs gave up, until her breath came in ragged sobs and her vision blurred. They found a small clearing and collapsed. The wind still blew. The trees still groaned. But the sounds of pursuit had vanished. For a while, there was only their breathing. I think we lost him, Clara said, chest heaving. Lottie nodded slowly, eyes wide and haunted. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Lottie whispered, "What now?" Clara looked up. The moon broke through a gap in the clouds, casting silver light across the trail. Her eyes followed it. "We keep going," she said. "We don't stop until we find someone who gives a damn." Her voice had changed, firmer, not just for Lottie, but for herself. Something had broken inside her back there, something old and useless. Now, all that remained was the will to live. She didn't know what lay ahead. Wolves, men, hunger. But she wasn't afraid anymore, not like before. Still clutching her sister's hand, she stood. And together, they walked deeper into the unknown, their shadows long beneath the trembling trees. From a distance, unseen, a pair of eyes watched them go, quiet, measuring, and somewhere behind them, in the woods they had escaped, a man cursed at the darkness, alone. But Clara never looked back. She didn't need to. What was behind them was dead. What was ahead might just save them. And though she didn't know it yet, the trail they'd stumbled onto wasn't forgotten. It was waiting. The forest looked different when the sun finally rose. Its shadows, which had loomed like monsters during the night, retreated into folds of amber and gold. The rain had stopped, leaving the trail slick with mud and sparkling with droplets on every leaf. Clara blinked against the sudden brightness, her face drawn with exhaustion, arms stiff from holding Lottie close all night. Her dress clung to her legs, heavy with grime and cold, but she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Lottie stirred beside her, stretching beneath the patchwork of trees above. Her lips were cracked, cheeks pale, but her eyes found Clara's with quiet trust. "I dreamed about Mama," she said softly. Clara forced a smile. "Me too." She hadn't, not really. Her sleep had been a shallow thing, haunted by the echoes of footsteps, the weight of a hand that had bruised too many memories. But now, with daylight pressing through the trees, they had to move. They had no food, no water, no direction, just instinct and each other. They continued walking, Clara scanning the landscape for any sign of shelter or life. She watched the sky, judged the sun's path, chose a direction that led them away from everything they had ever known. Their boots, Clara's torn and Lottie's too small, left soft prints in the mud behind them. By midday, fatigue wrapped itself around Clara like a chain. She kept one hand on her sister, steadying her, urging her on. But Lottie stumbled more often now, her steps dragging. Clara's throat burned with thirst, and her stomach felt like a cave echoing with emptiness. That was when she saw it. Smoke. Not thick like from a fire gone wild, but a soft, lazy column curling upward above the treetops. Controlled. Purposeful. Clara froze. Her mind raced with possibilities. A trapper's camp? A hunting party? Worse, men like her father? She crouched and pulled Lottie close. "Stay right here. Don't move. If you hear anything, run back that way, as fast as you can." Lottie clung to her. "No, don't leave me." Clara hesitated, her resolve cracking at the edges. But she had to know. She gently peeled her sister's arms away and crept toward the smoke, each step careful, calculated. Her breath came slow and shallow. Every snap twig sounded like a gunshot. She reached the edge of a small clearing and parted the brush. A camp. Not large, maybe 3 people at most. A fire pit smoldered with low flames, a stew pot hanging above it. A buckskin tarp stretched between trees offered shelter. She spotted a bough propped against a rock, and a pair of worn moccasins just outside the tent flap. Voices spoke softly in a language she didn't know, melodic, rhythmic. Then a laugh, low and warm. Clara crouched lower. Apache. She knew the stories. Everyone did. Savage. Bloodthirsty. Scalpers. Her father spat those words often, usually after too much whiskey. Her mother, once, had told her not to believe everything a man said when he was angry. But that had been years ago. Still, Clara hesitated. Fear gripped her like ice. But then she thought of Lottie, tired, hungry, alone. She made her choice. Standing slowly, Clara stepped into the clearing, hands raised. The reaction was instant. Two figures emerged. One woman, young, maybe in her 20s, with long black hair braided down her chest. She moved like a wolf, fast but quiet, her dark eyes sharp with surprise. Beside her stood a man, older, lean, and broad-shouldered. A scar ran across his chin, his expression unreadable. He didn't move for his weapon, but he didn't smile either. Clara forced her voice to steady. "We're not here to hurt anyone. My sister, she's just a child. We need help." The woman narrowed her eyes, assessing every inch of Clara. Her hand stayed near the knife at her belt. "Where's the child?" the man asked, his voice low, accented. Clara gestured behind her. "She's back that way. I told her to wait. Call her." Clara turned, cupped her hands. "Lottie, it's safe, come here." For a moment, nothing. Then a rustle. Leaves parted, and Lottie appeared, eyes wide but trusting, moving toward her sister. The Apache woman relaxed first. She stepped forward, kneeling so she met Lottie's eye. "What's your name, little one?" she asked in soft English. "Lottie." The woman smiled gently. "I'm Nalin. You're very brave." Clara lowered her hands, her breath trembling out. "We haven't eaten. We've been walking all night. We didn't know where else to go." The man finally spoke again. "Why are you out here? Where is your family?" Clara clenched her jaw. "Dead or worse." He studied her face. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. He nodded. "You'll eat. Then we decide." That was all Clara needed. They were brought closer to the fire, given small bowls of stew, simple, but warm and rich with wild herbs and meat. Lottie devoured hers, and Clara fought tears watching her sister finally eat. Nalin handed Clara a canteen. She drank, careful not to be greedy. The third member of their camp appeared, a man Clara hadn't seen, younger than the others, tall and lean, with intense eyes. His name, she later learned, was Tocho. He eyed them both with suspicion, but said nothing. Clara expected interrogation, but none came. Only quiet watchfulness. Later, as dusk rolled in, they were invited to rest beneath the tarp. Nalin offered Clara a blanket, and though she hesitated, she accepted. Lottie slept immediately, curled beside the fire, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with its crackle. Clara sat upright, watching the stars peek through the treetops. Nalin joined her. "You were lucky we saw your tracks," she said. Clara kept her gaze forward. "Didn't feel lucky." Nalin glanced at her. "What happened?" Clara hesitated, but something in Nalin's voice, not pity, but understanding, coaxed the truth. "Our father, he lost our home gambling. Tried to take us back. I ran. I had to. You did right." Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We don't have anywhere to go." "Maybe you do now," Nalin said softly. That night, Clara barely slept. Her mind spun with uncertainty. These people were strangers, but they had fed her, given her warmth. There was no cruelty here, no raised hands or bitter stares. Just firelight and quiet strength. In the morning, they walked with Nalin, Tocho, and the older man, Kuli, through denser woods. They traveled in silence, efficient and sure-footed. Clara kept Lottie close, alert for signs of danger, but none came. By afternoon, they reached the Apache village. Tents and shelters, made of bark and hide, formed a small ring around a central fire. Children played with carved dolls and sticks. Women carried water and weaved baskets. Men sharpened arrows or worked leather. Every pair of eyes turned to Clara and Lottie as they entered. Whispers rose like smoke. Clara's stomach twisted. She heard one word repeated often. "Nata outsider." Kuli spoke to one of the elders. There was tension, frowns, disbelief. One woman pointed at Clara, arguing. Nalin spoke firmly in reply. The crowd quieted. Clara felt like she was under a microscope, every heartbeat exposed. Finally, the elder approached her. His face was like weathered stone, and his eyes carried decades of storms. "You bring trouble?" Clara lifted her chin. "Only what I ran from." He studied her a moment longer. Then, with a small nod, he turned and walked away. Nalin leaned in. You may stay for now." That night, the stars were clearer than Clara had ever seen. She sat near the edge of the camp, Lottie nestled in her lap. "Are we safe?" Lottie whispered. Clara looked around, at the warm light of the fires, the soft laughter of children, the quiet harmony of a world that didn't feel like hers yet. "I think we are," she said. But deep inside, a flicker of uncertainty remained, because the past wasn't gone. And even surrounded by kindness, Clara knew fire could warm, but it could also burn. Clara awoke to the smell of smoke, and the warmth of morning sun filtered through the stitched hide of the Apache dwelling. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The sound of children laughing outside, the gentle crackle of a cooking fire, the rhythmic thump of a pestle grinding herbs. It was all so different from the cracked ceilings, the bitter shouts, the cold silences of her father's house. Lottie slept beside her, arms tucked under her chin, face peaceful in a way Clara had not seen in months. She sat up slowly, listening. The village was stirring. Women passed by with baskets of roots and dried corn. Young men tightened saddle straps, and old voices murmured over fire. Yet beneath the calm, Clara sensed a stillness, an alertness. She had felt it since the day they arrived, a current beneath every glance. The Apache hadn't turned them away. But Clara knew acceptance wasn't the same as belonging. She stepped outside, shielding her eyes from the bright morning light. Nalin stood by the fire pit, slicing dried venison with a flint knife. She glanced over and offered a nod. Clara returned it, stiff and unsure. "You slept long," Nalin said. Clara rubbed the back of her neck. "Didn't mean to." "You needed it." Tocho passed behind them, his bow slung over one shoulder. He didn't look at Clara, but he had never been unkind, just wary. Like most of the tribe. Like she would be if two strangers walked into her life and asked for sanctuary. Clara bent down to help Nalin, and the other woman said nothing. They worked in silence, their rhythm surprisingly natural. When Clara sliced her thumb on the flint, Nalin handed her a strip of cloth without a word. Later, while Lottie played with a group of children weaving grass dolls, Clara sat at the edge of camp with Taza, Nalin's older brother. He was a quiet man, with deep scars across his knuckles, and a gaze that always seemed to be searching the horizon. "You fight like you fought before," he said, handing her a carved wooden stick shaped like a training blade. "I've never held a real weapon," she replied, taking it. "Then we start small." He showed her how to stand, how to hold the blade, how to shift her weight to avoid being thrown. Clara listened, imitating him carefully. She didn't ask why he was teaching her. Part of her already knew. They were preparing for something. By the third day, whispers reached her ears. They came not from the children, but from older voices. Arguments murmured around the fire, glances cast toward her and Lottie when they passed. Words in Apache that Clara didn't yet understand, but could interpret from tone alone. They didn't belong here. Not truly. That night, Clara approached Nalin while the others ate. Her voice hushed. "Is this going to end with us being sent away?" Nalin didn't look up from her meal. "Some think it's dangerous. Not because of you, but because of what might follow." Clara understood. Her father was a man who didn't give up what he considered his. If he had sent someone after them once, he'd do it again. The thought of him arriving here, among these people, set her blood cold. "I can leave," she said. Nalin finally looked at her. "You ran into the forest with nothing but your sister's hand in yours. You've slept in mud and kept moving. Why give up now?" "Because I don't want to bring harm to people who've shown us kindness. You're not the first to run from cruelty, and you won't be the last." The next day, Clara awoke to tension in the air. A stranger had arrived. He rode into camp just past sunrise, on a mottled horse with a dull brown coat and eyes that looked like old coins, lifeless, searching. A white man, heavy-set with tobacco-stained fingers and a pistol at his belt. He claimed to be a trader, claimed to be looking for lost goods and travelers. But his eyes lingered too long on Clara, and when he spoke, his voice carried the drawl of a man who had done plenty of lying and gotten away with most of it. Cully, the elder, greeted him politely but cautiously. Taza stood nearby, arms folded. Clara remained in the shadows, Lottie hidden behind her. The trader dismounted, pulled a crumpled paper from his coat, and tossed it onto the ground. A bounty notice. 2 girls. One tall, age 20. One small, age 10. Missing from a settlement near Bitter Rock. Considered property of Thomas Hadley. Clara's heart froze. Nalin stepped forward, her voice sharp. We've seen no one like this. The trader's grin faltered. You sure? Word is they was taken. Or ran off. Either way, there's reward money. We do not sell people here. The man didn't push further. Not openly. He mounted again, muttering something about savages and waste, and rode off the way he came. But Clara knew this was only the beginning. That night, around the fire, the elders met. Voices rose in argument. Some said it was not their war, that if the white man came with weapons, blood would follow. Others, fewer but louder, said that turning away children from fear was no better than abandoning their own. Clara stood at the edge of that circle, fists clenched, shame and fury choking her throat. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't going to run again, not if it meant Lottie would be dragged back to that monster. The next morning, she found Taza waiting for her outside her shelter. He handed her a real knife, not a toy, not for training. You learn fast, he said. Clara took it without hesitation. Then teach me faster. Over the next days, she trained with him in the forest. He showed her how to move without sound, how to strike from the shadows, how to set traps. Nalin taught her how to identify safe herbs, to dress a wound, to braid grass into snares. Lottie, meanwhile, became part of the children's circle. Her laughter returned, tentative at first, then genuine. She learned to carve wooden animals and sing short songs in Apache. She still asked about their mother, sometimes. But she never once mentioned their father. Clara watched her with pride and sorrow. Then it happened. Just before dawn on a cool morning, they heard the hoofbeats. 3 horses. One of them carrying her father. He hadn't come alone. 2 other men flanked him, both rough, both armed. They entered the outer edge of the village with no pretense, no courtesy. Her father dismounted like he owned the land and shouted her name. Clara, I know you're here. Come on out, girl. Enough playing house with these godless folk. The village stirred. Warriors stepped forward with bows and spears. Taza stood at Clara's side, his stance firm, eyes locked on the intruders. Her father's face twisted when he saw her. You belong to me, both of you, and you're coming back now. Clara stepped forward. No, she said. Not this time. He laughed. You think these savages are going to stop me? You lost the right to call us yours the day you threw us into the rain. One of the men with him reached for his pistol. Taza moved first, knocking the weapon aside with his spear. The pistol went off, the shot wide and harmless. Tocho appeared behind them, bow drawn. More warriors closed in. The second man dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Her father cursed, grabbed the reins of his horse, and backed away, spitting venom. This ain't over, girl. Yes, Clara said, voice low. It is. They left, humiliated. The Apache didn't cheer. They didn't gloat. But Clara felt it, a shift. A quiet nod of recognition. Not acceptance, not yet. But respect. Later, by the fire, Cully spoke to her for the first time in many days. You faced the ashes of your past and didn't flinch. Clara said nothing. She only looked at Lottie, who was laughing again under the starlight. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe they might truly be free. The land breathed beneath Clara's boots as she climbed the ridge, the sky painted in strokes of orange and red behind her. She paused at the top, her silhouette outlined by the dying sun. Below, nestled in a shallow valley, the village flickered with the warm glow of firelight, like embers scattered across the earth. Smoke drifted lazily upward from cook fires. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, faint but vibrant. Clara took it all in. This place, these people, the life she and Lottie had somehow carved out of fear and ashes. It didn't feel foreign anymore. The language still tripped on her tongue, but the rhythm of daily life pulsed through her veins now. She had learned the ways of fire, of earth, of silence and steel. She had learned to protect, to heal, to listen. And more than anything, she had learned to trust again. Lottie's voice rang out from below, pulling her from her thoughts. "Clara, come down. They're starting." Clara smiled and turned from the ridge, descending the path with the same ease she once only faked. Her steps were sure now. The ground no longer felt like something she might be swallowed by. The village had gathered around the central fire. Nalin, ever graceful and strong, stood beside Kuli, who held a carved staff in his weathered hands. Taza waited near the edge of the circle, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his eyes as Clara approached. The people parted to let her through. Tonight was the naming. It wasn't a ceremony for outsiders. Not normally. But Clara had ceased being just a visitor the day she stood between the village and her father, when she raised her voice and blade against the past. Kuli spoke first, his voice deep and even. When someone is born into fire and survived the burn, they carry its strength in their bones. This child of the storm came to us wounded, hollow, burdened. But fire does not destroy all, it forges. He turned to Clara. "You have earned a name." Clara swallowed hard, her pulse beating behind her eyes. The people were silent, watching her, not with suspicion now, but with anticipation, with belonging. Kuli raised his hand and said, "You are now a Yokota, Iron Willow, the one who bends but does not break." A quiet murmur spread through the circle. Lottie clapped, eyes wide with joy. Taza gave a single nod, which from him was louder than applause. Clara stepped forward, kneeling to accept the token they offered her. A thin, smooth band of silver etched with flames and branches slipped around her wrist by Nalin. The fire cracked behind her, sending sparks into the night. Clara stood taller than she ever had before. Later, as the village feasted, Clara and Lottie sat beside the fire with bowls of roasted maize and venison. Lottie leaned against her, sleepy but smiling. "Do I get a name too?" she asked. Clara kissed the top of her head. "You already have one. But maybe one day, when you're ready, they'll give you a second." Lottie yawned, curling closer. "I want to be strong like you." Clara smiled, the ache in her chest not from sorrow, but from love. "You already are." A hush fell over the village as Taza approached. He crouched beside Clara, his eyes flickering with the firelight. "There's something you should see," he said quietly. Clara's body stiffened. "What is it?" He glanced toward the darkness beyond the village. "Smoke. East Ridge. Too far for a wildfire." Clara rose immediately, handing Lottie off to Nalin with a look. No words were needed. She followed Taza into the trees, her knife sheathed at her hip, a bow slung across her back. They moved fast but silent, a dance they had practiced for weeks. The path was narrow, winding up toward the overlook where she had stood just hours earlier. When they reached the top, Clara's breath caught. Far off, across the flat plains, 3 fires burned. Not campfires. Torches. A search party. "How close?" she asked. "Too close. They'll reach us by morning." Clara's fists clenched. "Him. I don't know," Taza said. "But they're white men. And they're armed." For a moment, Clara's old self reared up, the girl who had flinched at sudden sounds, who had cowered in doorways, who had run with nothing but her sister and a whisper of hope. But that girl was a shadow now. She turned to Taza. "Then we make ready." At dawn, the village was alive with motion. Warriors prepared defenses. Elders gathered children in the central shelter. Clara joined the others, stringing traps and barriers through the narrow paths leading into the village. Tocho handed her a bow with a small smile. She took it without hesitation. Lottie stood near the edge of the shelter, watching with wide eyes. Clara knelt in front of her. "No matter what happens, you stay close to Nalin. Do you understand?" Lottie nodded, clutching a small wooden bird she had carved the week before. "You'll come back. I'll always come back." Clara pressed her forehead to Lottie's and then rose. The first sign of their approach came with dust, kicked up by hooves and boots, rising like smoke over the ridge. Clara, hidden in the trees with Taza and 2 others, watched through the branches. For men, her father wasn't among them. But they bore the same look, guns, sneers, confidence born from years of cruelty. Clara waited until the lead man stepped past the first trap. A sudden snap, and the ground beneath him gave way. He tumbled with a shout into the pit, landing hard among sharpened stakes. The others shouted, drawing their weapons. Clara moved like the wind. An arrow loosed, striking one man in the thigh. Taza stepped forward, his spear a blur, disarming the third before he could fire. The fourth ran, straight into Tocho's waiting fist. The fight was over in minutes. Clara stood over the pit, staring down at the man groaning at the bottom. He looked up at her, face twisted in pain and confusion. "You're just a girl," he spat. Clara's voice was calm, cold. "Not anymore." They dragged the men to the edge of the ridge and left them there, alive but humiliated, their weapons taken, their pride shattered. Clara returned to the village before sunset. Lottie ran to her, arms tight around her waist. "I knew you'd come back." Clara held her close, her heart steady now. Not numb, not hardened, but strong. That night, as the fire danced and the people sang, Clara sat beside Taza and Nalin, Lottie in her lap. She watched the stars rise above the trees. Her past had come for her, and she had met it not with fear, but with fire. She had not just survived. She had built something new from the ashes. The wind whispered through the trees, and the flames crackled as if speaking back. If this story moved you, if it lit even a small spark inside you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because somewhere, someone's still running, still searching. And fire, real fire, the kind that never fades, that's what saves them.